at the ceasefire talks with Ukraine in Turkey. Russia has demanded that Kyiv accept neutrality, limit its military, and permanently drop aspiration to join the NATO. The Russian memorandum also called for recognition of Russian control over Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, a ban on Western arms and intelligence aid, and a full lifting of sanctions. Ukraine has remained firm in its stance. Ukraine has stated that there would be no recognition of Russian land grabs, no limits on its military, and no peace deal without a full, unconditional ceasefire. Kyiv says it expects Moscow's response to its own peace proposal by the end of June. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed Russia's proposal for a 2 to 3 day partial ceasefire, saying that Moscow only wants a short pause in fighting. The talks, which lasted just over an hour, failed to produce a ceasefire agreement. However, both sides did commit to a large-scale prisoner swap, including at least 1,000 military personnel each, with an additional swap of 200 possible. They also agreed to exchange the bodies of 6,000 dead soldiers. The talks had come just a day after Ukraine launched Operation Spiderweb, an audacious drone offensive deep into Russian territory, which targeted multiple air bases and damaged up to 40 strategic Russian bombers. Zelensky said that Russia's goal is to continue the war and is now urging U.S. President Donald Trump to approve tougher sanctions to pressure Moscow into a full ceasefire. Let's listen in to what Zelensky had to say.
Тому для нас дуже важливо ще раз підкреслити, як на останній нашій розмові з президентом Трампом, що якщо в цей раз Стамбул буде щодо припинення вогню не рухатись вперед, то повинні бути сильні кроки від Штатів, передусім пакет санкцій.
Despite the impasse, the White House has said that Trump is open to meeting with both Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Turkey, if such a summit can help move talks forward. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered to host that meeting. Let's listen in to what the White House press secretary had to say.
Suggesting that it's high time that leaders, President Erdogan, President Trump, President Putin and President Zelensky meet in Istanbul. Is that something that President Trump would support and would be partaking?
Well, the president has said he's open to it if it comes to that, but he wants both of these leaders and both sides to sit down at the table together. And we saw them do that at the urging of President Trump today. But as for how the president feels about those talks and what took place there, I'll let him speak on that.
Meanwhile, Russia's lead negotiator Vladimir Medinsky confirmed he met with Ukraine's defense minister before the wider talks began. Moscow, he said, is focused on a long-term settlement, not a temporary halt in combat. Elsewhere, Russia's overnight attacks killed one person in Ukraine's northeast region of Kharkiv and injured several more in the northern city of Chernihiv. Meanwhile, Ukrainian attacks have triggered widespread power outages across territories in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. Meanwhile, as the ceasefire talks were going on, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met key international partners at the NATO Eastern Flank Summit in Lithuania. Zelensky sat down with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, thanking the alliance for its steadfast support. In a social media post, he said that he briefed Rutte on recent agreements reached in Istanbul over prisoner exchanges with Russia and the return of Ukrainian children. He also met with Norwegian Prime Minister to discuss continued support for Ukraine, including strengthening air defense systems, boosting investment in Ukraine's defense industry, and increasing pressure on Russia through additional sanctions. Zelensky also held talks with Romania's newly elected president Nicusar Dan, congratulating him on his election's victory. The two leaders discussed diplomatic efforts to achieve peace in Ukraine, recent negotiations with Russia in Istanbul, and the need to toughen sanctions against Moscow to curb its military production. The Israeli military says its troops fired at individuals half a kilometer from a US-backed aid distribution site in Gaza, claiming they posted a threat while moving towards the forces. This comes as local officials say at least 15 people were killed near the site. Gaza's health ministry puts the toll higher, saying 24 people died early Tuesday. The incident is under investigation. Meanwhile, 3 Israeli soldiers were killed in intense clashes in northern Gaza, according to the Israeli military. Hamas fighters reportedly engaged troops in heavy gunfire in the area. In another development, 3 Palestinians have been reported killed and dozens more wounded near a US-backed aid distribution site in Gaza, according to local medics. The Israeli military acknowledged the incident, saying troops fired warning shots at individuals approaching their position from a kilometer from the site. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which operates the center, denies that any casualties occurred at or near the facility. This comes just a day after a separate incident near the same site reportedly left at least 31 Palestinians dead. Witnesses, including humanitarian groups, say Israeli forces opened fire as civilians gathered to collect aid. The Israeli military denies this, calling the reports false, and blames Hamas for spreading misinformation. The GHF also described the claims as fabricated. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate and independent investigation into the deaths, stating he is appalled by the reports. Israel's foreign ministry sharply criticized Guterres for not condemning Hamas. Meanwhile, ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas remain stalled. A Palestinian official involved in the negotiations says Hamas continues to engage with Egyptian and Qatari mediators. Israel says it remains open to a temporary truce to secure a release of hostages, but insists the war will continue until Hamas is removed entirely from Gaza. Israel has intercepted a missile fired from Yemen on Monday, according to the Israeli army. Sirens sounded across multiple areas, including Jerusalem, as the missile was shot down mid-air. Houthi rebels claimed responsibility, saying they targeted Ben Gurion International Airport near Tel Aviv. Loud explosions were heard overhead, but no damage or injuries were reported. This marks the latest in a series of long-range attacks launched by the Iran-backed group since the Gaza war began. Here's what the Houthi military spokesperson had to say.
القوات الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية استهدفت مطار اللد في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخ باليستي نوع ذي الفقار، وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وأجبرت 4 ملايين صهيوني على الهروب إلى الملاجئ ووقف حركة الملاحة في المطار.
Israel responded with a powerful strike on Sana'a International Airport in Yemen, destroying the last civilian plane meant for Hajj pilgrims. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu blamed Iran for backing the Houthis, calling them a symptom of a larger threat. Tensions continue to escalate between Israel and the Houthis, with no sign of de-escalation despite past ceasefires. Now we move on to North America. In a major development in the Colorado attack, a federal prosecutor says the suspect accused of hurling Molotov cocktails at a crowd gathered in support of Israeli hostages in Gaza is now facing charges of attempted murder and a hate crime. Let's hear from the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Colorado.
My office has charged Mohammed Sabri Solomon, age 45, with the commission of a hate crime. Mr. Solomon stated that he had been planning this attack for a year, and he acted because he hated what he called the Zionist group. And when he was interviewed about the attack, he said he wanted them all to die. He had no regrets, and he would go back and do it again. He said that he had previously tried to purchase a firearm, but resorted to the Molotov cocktails when he could not purchase a gun because he was not a legal citizen.
Boulder County District Attorney Michael Dougherty has also weighed in on the incident. Let's listen to what he had to say.
As you heard from the U.S. Attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office will be prosecuting the hate crime against the defendant. Our office will be prosecuting the attempted murder charges and related charges at the state level.
And President Donald Trump has condemned the attack, calling it a terrible tragedy. In a post on his Truth Social, Trump blamed the incident on immigration policies under former President Joe Biden. Now we move on to Middle